Ethan had always noticed how quiet moments could feel loud when feelings were unspoken, and on that early spring morning in Seattle, everything felt louder than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath. He arrived at the cafe near the office before Claire, as he often did, watching people pass by through the glass window while pretending not to think about her. When she walked in, smiling, brushing rain from her coat, his chest tightened in that familiar way. They ordered their usual drinks without asking, sat in their usual seats, and talked about work deadlines, office gossip, and small plans for the weekend. To anyone watching, they looked like something more than friends. They leaned in when they talked, laughed too easily, and shared comfortable silences that couples usually had. Ethan had once believed that comfort meant something was growing, that time and patience would turn feelings into truth. But then, as always, someone from work passed by their table, smiled knowingly, and joked, "You two should just admit it already." Claire laughed first, quick and light, and said the words Ethan both expected and feared, "Oh no, we're just friends." She said it kindly, without hesitation, as if the idea of anything else had never crossed her mind. Ethan smiled too, because that was what he had trained himself to do, even though something small cracked inside him each time he heard those words. He told himself he was being mature, that friendship was still valuable, that not all feelings needed to be returned. Still, as the day went on, he replayed the moment in his head, her easy laugh, her certainty, and his own silence. At work, Claire stopped by his desk, resting her hand lightly on the edge as she told him about a date she had gone on the night before. She spoke casually, without noticing how Ethan's fingers curled slightly against his keyboard. He listened, nodded, and even asked polite questions, playing the role he had learned well. Inside, he felt like he was slowly shrinking, like a part of him was being asked to disappear quietly. When she walked away, he stared at his screen without reading it, realizing that his hope had been living on borrowed time. That evening, they walked out of the building together, the city glowing with streetlights and soft rain. Claire talked about future plans, about trips she wanted to take, about people she might meet someday. She spoke as if Ethan would always be there, unchanged, steady, waiting. That was when he felt it clearly, not as anger, but as a calm, heavy understanding. He was standing in a place where he could not move forward, only remain. When they reached the corner where their paths separated, Claire smiled and said, "You'll find someone amazing too, Ethan. I just know it." Her words were meant to be kind, but they landed like a quiet ending. He nodded, said goodnight, and watched her walk away, realizing that the line she had drawn between them was not new, but he was only now choosing to see it. That night, alone in his apartment, he did not feel dramatic or broken. He felt clear. Clear enough to admit that waiting for someone who called him a friend was slowly teaching him to accept less than he deserved. As the city lights flickered outside his window, Ethan made a decision without speeches or promises. He would stop hoping in silence. He would stop standing in the space between words and feelings. He did not know who would come next or how long it would take, but for the first time, he chose himself. And somewhere deep inside, even before anyone else noticed, the story quietly began to change. A few weeks after deciding to stop waiting, Ethan found himself at a friend's birthday dinner, feeling unusually light, as if the weight of unspoken feelings had been lifted just enough for him to breathe. The restaurant was warm, filled with chatter and laughter, and he drifted to a corner with a drink in hand, scanning the room without much interest, until a voice called his name. Hannah stood there, smiling, with a kind energy that seemed to reach straight to the quiet corners of his mind. She was different from anyone he had met in a long time, easy to talk to, genuinely curious about him, and not carrying the complicated history of unreturned feelings. They began to talk, first small things about work and mutual friends, then stories of travel and dreams that had been tucked away. Each laugh, each thoughtful glance, felt like a gentle tug on a part of him he hadn't realized was closed. They exchanged numbers before the night ended, and soon, their conversations spilled into text messages, late-night calls, and coffee meetups on weekends. Ethan noticed how calm it felt to be around her, how her presence didn't demand anything he wasn't ready to give. One sunny afternoon, they walked along the waterfront, sharing stories of childhood, favorite movies, and secret hopes for the future. It was easy, natural, and for the first time in months, Ethan didn't feel the old ache of unrequited feelings pressing at his chest. Their small moments together began to grow: a shared dessert, a quiet smile across a crowded cafe, a gentle touch on the hand that lingered longer than necessary but never forced. One evening, he posted a photo online, just him and Hannah, smiling over coffee, the caption simple and unremarkable, yet it carried the truth of his growing happiness. Claire saw it the next morning at work, her reaction subtle at first, eyes narrowing slightly, a pause in her routine, but Ethan noticed the change immediately. Her pen hovered over the paper longer than usual, and when he mentioned Hannah casually, her smile faltered. "So, you're seeing someone now?" she asked, voice carefully neutral. "Yes," he replied softly, and for the first time, he realized how much her calmness had depended on his single, quiet hope. Claire nodded, words polite, but her silence afterward spoke louder than any confession. It was strange for Ethan to feel the shift so tangibly, to recognize the faint tension in the air that had never existed before. Days passed, and Claire oscillated between avoiding him and seeking him out, questions slipping from her lips that she had never asked before. "Is she serious with you?" she asked once, then quickly, almost too late, added, "Do you really like her?" Ethan answered honestly, gently, sensing that the balance of their friendship had subtly shifted. Claire's glances lingered, her laughter felt sharper, more deliberate, and he began to understand that something she had kept hidden, something she had perhaps never admitted to herself, was stirring quietly in the space between them. Ethan felt a mixture of confusion and clarity. He was free to choose his own happiness, yet he could not ignore the faint pull of the bond he had shared with Claire for so long. Every interaction now carried a weight, a quiet drama that neither of them had scripted, yet both sensed. Never seen before, jealousy. He felt the pull of the old friendship and the delicate honesty of his new feelings for Hannah colliding in ways that were both confusing and illuminating. One evening, after work, Claire asked him to walk with her through the park near their office, a place they had visited often as friends, where the trees created a quiet canopy above them and the city noise faded into the background. The sun was low, casting soft golden light over the paths, and for the first time, Ethan saw her vulnerability fully. "I didn't expect this to hurt," she admitted, her voice low, almost a whisper, as if speaking louder might shatter the fragile honesty between them. "Seeing you with someone else, it stings more than I thought it would." Ethan stopped walking, the words hanging in the air like delicate glass. He had known her honesty was rare, but this admission carried more weight than he could have anticipated. "But you said we were just friends," he replied, steady but careful, not wanting to hurt her yet needing the truth to be clear. Claire looked at him then, not as a friend, but as someone who was suddenly afraid of losing something she had never claimed. Her eyes were full of longing and regret, a mixture of emotions that left him both aching and understanding at the same time. "I know," she whispered. "And I meant it, or I thought I did." Ethan realized that her words were a confession of a feeling she had tried to ignore, a truth she had hidden from herself and from him. She only realized the depth of her feelings when confronted with the reality that he could belong to someone else, that his heart was moving forward while hers had been suspended in the quiet limbo of just friends. They walked the rest of the path in silence, the tension between them palpable, each lost in thought, each trying to understand what had changed. Ethan could feel the weight of the past friendship pressing gently against the new possibilities of his life, and in that moment, he understood something crucial. Emotions are not always logical, and love often reveals itself in absence rather than presence. Claire's subtle jealousy, her carefully hidden longing, and the quiet pain in her gaze showed him that her feelings had existed all along, quietly, silently, waiting for the moment when she could no longer ignore them. But for Ethan, the clarity he had gained weeks ago remained intact. He could not live in the space between what she felt and what she had said. He could not wait indefinitely for someone to claim a love they had refused to name. And so, as the evening deepened and shadows stretched across the park, he felt a mixture of sadness and resolution, a quiet acceptance that some truths are realized too late, that timing shapes love as much as feeling does, and that moving forward sometimes means stepping away from the familiarity of what once was, no matter how painful it might be to leave it behind. That night, walking home under the city lights, Ethan understood that the world had shifted subtly but irrevocably. Claire's heart had finally spoken, but his own journey was already following a path of honesty, choice, and new beginnings, a path that promised clarity, growth, and the possibility of something real with someone who had entered his life at just the right moment, while the shadow of unspoken feelings with Claire lingered gently behind him, a bittersweet reminder of what had been. And what could never return. That evening, Ethan knew he had to be honest, not just with Claire, but with himself, because the delicate tension that had grown between them could no longer be ignored, and the quiet longing in her eyes demanded clarity rather than hesitation. They walked together through the park again, the same path where truths had started to surface, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled, creating a soft, reflective glow around them. Claire's steps were hesitant at first, but when she finally spoke, her voice was steady, tinged with vulnerability. "I didn't think it would hurt this much," she admitted, looking down at the path, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "Seeing you with her, seeing you move on. I wasn't ready for this." Ethan stopped and faced her, feeling the weight of years of friendship, shared laughter, and unspoken feelings pressing between them. "Claire," he said softly, "I cared about you for a long time, more than I probably should have kept inside, but I can't live in the space between what you feel and what you say. I need honesty, clarity, and a chance to build something real, not just hold on to what could have been." She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall, as if holding them back gave her a small measure of control. "I understand," she whispered. "I was scared to want more, scared to risk what we had. And now, maybe it's too late." Ethan felt a surge of sadness, a gentle ache, because he knew how hard it must have been for her to admit this, but he also felt the quiet relief of truth, the freedom that comes when emotions are faced rather than hidden. They stood there for a long moment, the city noise distant, hearts heavy yet honest, knowing this moment marked an ending, but also a beginning. Ethan had made his choice, and it was not easy, yet it was clear he would walk forward with someone who was present, who openly shared feelings, and who offered love without hesitation. Claire's presence, her confession, and the pain in her eyes would remain a tender memory, a bittersweet lesson about timing, honesty, and the courage it takes to confront one's own heart. As he turned to leave, the air between them was filled with unspoken words, memories, and a quiet respect for what they had shared, while also acknowledging the paths they were now destined to walk separately. Later, with Hannah, Ethan felt the gentle unfolding of a love that was mutual, honest, and chosen, a warmth that grew with each small moment, each smile, and each shared dream, reminding him that moving forward was not forgetting, but embracing the reality of what could be. Claire, too, began her own journey of understanding her feelings, realizing that sometimes love is revealed only when it is almost too late, and that the courage to admit desire does not always align with timing or outcome. The night ended with Ethan feeling a profound mixture of sadness and liberation, knowing he had honored both his past and his present, understanding that love, honesty, and timing are intertwined in ways that are often unpredictable, delicate, and ultimately transformative, leaving each heart wiser, more aware, and ready to embrace the chapters yet to come.